We've just had coffee, Andrew and I, and we did start by reflecting on how incredible it is that it has been 10 years since the financial crisis. Where do you think, Andrew, the blame lays, or the main causes of the cultural damage that was done to the financial industry is?
Well, I think it's interesting. So I always say that I think we've had either more than one crisis or more than one phase to the crisis. So we're 10 years literally from the sort of peak of the technical prudential crisis, failure of Lehman and consequences. But of course, in the conduct world, we've had a whole series of things that have come to light since then. So whether you take sort of LIBOR, foreign exchange, the real growth of PPI in the retail market, and some of the difficult issues in handling small firms. And you can look across the piece, and those things, of course, these come to light subsequently. So it's not just 10 years on. I think when you try to sort of put those all together, I think one of the things that always strikes me looking backwards and looking at the history of it is that there was a very different culture, I think, in the period leading up to the crisis, and there are some common roots, I think, for both the prudential and the conduct elements. I think there was a sort of common root of what tends to be called light touch. I don't think, to be fair to the regulators of the day, I don't really think it was invented in the regulators, but there was, I think, a prevailing culture that if you left financial services to its own devices, to coin the phrase, sort of rising tide lifted all boats, everybody benefited from it. So the sort of success that we saw in that period leading up to the crisis would benefit everybody, consumers, financial services firms, those working in them, etc. And of course, it's really in the aftermath of that. Obviously, we've seen that that was not the case. But I think that was very much the prevailing culture, and I think we now live in very different times culturally.
I mean, whose job is it to fix the culture?
Well, first and foremost, of course, it lies with the firms, with the management and governance of firms. I want to say clear, the regulators have an important role to play, but we don't do it, and we don't run firms. So we're setting a framework, we're overseeing that framework, and of course we've made important changes. And I think, if I highlighted, obviously one of them, it would be the senior managers regime, which we're actually, the FCA, in the process of now implementing beyond the banking industry into the large part of the rest of the 50-odd thousand firms that we regulate. And that, the reason I highlight the senior managers regime, which came out of the Parliamentary Commission on Banking, is that for me it really does have at the heart two very important principles. One is responsibility, and the other is accountability. And those are the principles at the heart of it. And in one sense, they're very simple principles. I mean, since we all follow them all the time, as it were. But the simplicity, of course, under the simplicity is a good deal of you have to think quite hard about how you make it work, and that's important. But they are fundamental because, again, if you look back at the regime that we had before, it didn't really have those principles sort of properly embedded in it.
So how would you say firms are doing it?
Well, I think that it's being taken on board quite effectively, actually. It's always interesting with these things, and I've seen it in a number of the changes that have happened since the crisis, that it's probably unsurprising that in the sort of initial phase of the sort of debate around what form they take and so on, there's a degree of sort of resistance to the unknown. I'm interested when I go to boards, for instance, and they say, actually, it's actually been quite helpful. Because I think, again, if you go back to the point about responsibility and accountability, it's not just for the regulators, it's actually within the firms.
Are those firms seeing that as a given now? That's just something they have to do? Or are you still sensing a bit of resistance?
No, I think it is much more of a given. I think the same is true, for instance, on the changes that were made in remuneration policy, actually. Again, early days, I used to get a lot of conversations, particularly around remuneration season, about, well, if you do this, then we'll lose our staff, we'll lose them to overseas. And I don't get those conversations. They don't tend to happen these days.
There's not a book, though, that tells you how to regulate a bank. You can't go and look this up.
No.
Not a one-size-fits-all.
Not the FCA.
Not yet.
Not the FCA
you might be right in your spare time. So what are regulators doing, Andrew, to combat?
Sorry, to combat?
Well, there's no way of telling someone how to regulate a bank. It's not this sort of one size fits all.
Oh, how to be regulated.
Yes, if we talk about regulation.
Well, we do. We have. I mean, it's interesting. So we have a PRA here, and we've done a lot of work rebuilding our own training and development of our own staff. But you're right. It's quite interesting. I've been in and out of regulation for over 30 years, and it's prudential and conduct now, and it's quite interesting. So supervision, particularly, which is part of it, big part of it. There isn't a book on how to do it actually. And that's one of the interesting things. So when we, particularly with the PRA and now the FCA, when we started sort of on the rebuilding of the system post-2010, one of the things that I was very clear on is that there has to be judgment on there. This was the sort of part of the reaction to the so-called box ticking we think of the past, but there has to be judgment in there. And that's quite hard. I mean, it's hard in several ways. It's obviously hard to sort of, it sounds a bit pompous to say teach people judgment. You don't teach people judgment. You can build it into your institution, and it's hard in that sense. Then you have to govern it effectively, because we don't go out there making random decisions.
And in terms of that judgment, how do you come to that point? Who are you talking to come to the positions that you do?
Well, so obviously we have an overview of the firms. It's different in the PRA and the FCA. PRA's got sort of 1,500 or so firms. FCA's got over 56,000, so you have a very different approach. But for the big firms, it's not that different. You've got a pretty regular line of contact at quite a few levels of our institutions, from me downwards, from Sam Woods down into the PRA, down to the supervisors who are sort of involved in the institution all the time. And we do have regular contact. I mean, I do react slightly badly when people say, well, you shouldn't be in contact with institutions because you'll get sort of compromised that way. I mean, that's not going to work as a start. We have to be in contact, but we have to do it obviously effectively. And you build up a pattern. You build up a pattern. We talk quite a lot inside the regulators. We talk between the FCA and the PRA. And out of that, you put evidence together, and you begin to build up a view on firms. And we're always a bit careful. We don't obviously go around sort of advertising to the world what the view necessarily is publicly. But if you spend a lot of time inside the regulators, you'll get a view.
So tell us a bit more about what you're doing with firms.
Well, now. Well, so interesting. If you look at the risks that we're facing in the sort of world today, I think one of the big things that I've observed, and if you look at the last 10 years, which is we're reflecting on that. So one of the big things that's changed in the 10-year period is the relative rise of operational risk of various forms as a significant risk. If we go back 10 years, obviously we were in the teeth of fighting a crisis 10 years ago, and we thought the world was dominated by that. And frankly, if you'd said to us, in 10 years' time, it's going to be operational risk, we probably looked a bit askance and saying, really? We're sort of in the teeth of fighting something much worse. But when I look at it in context, I think the rise, and operational risk takes a number of forms, so I'll give you sort of a few headings there. Obviously in terms of sort of systems, but cyber, which is, again, it's come up the league table very rapidly. And it's different. I would say one thing also is different about that sort of risk is that you can't take a single conclusive mitigating action, because it's always evolving and coming at you. And for a regulator and for firms, that's a change. I would say the sort of slight, if the Treasury Select Committee won't mind me parodying them for a moment, the classic Treasury Select Committee was, will you assure me, Mr. Bailey, this will never happen again? And I can tell you with cyber, I can assure you one thing, it probably has happened while we've been talking. But, so that's one thing. Obviously operational resilience in terms of, and particularly given obviously the increasing interface with customers using technology rather than human interface. I think the big one for us of the last year or so is data. Yeah. And that takes two forms as well. So again, to put it rather simply, A, losing it, but B, how you use it. And that's a big issue. I mean, it's a growing issue. If I look at what we spend our time on at the FCA, the use of data and both the use and sometimes the misuse of data is a growing issue. So use, there are obviously very beneficial effects of using data, using customer data particularly. But there are issues that arise. I mean, the one that was highlighted to some degree in the super complaint that Citizens Advice filed last week is if you use greater access to data to more readily identify customers who are, to use an unfortunate word, inert in their behaviour, and you then price against those customers, and you're more able to do that because you've got more data. That immediately poses an issue.
I mean, I think if you ask anyone, any member of the public about data, they talk about how important it is to them now. And sometimes they don't even know what that means. But it comes to this sort of issue of trust as well.
Yes.
Where do you think we're at right now in terms of trust in financial services and the financial sector and the public?
Well, I think we're on a pretty long haul in terms of building trust. I was going to say rebuilding trust. And it's not a thing that seems to me to happen quickly. I don't think you can. It's not a sort of light bulb thing where you can sort of come in one day and sort of switch the trust light bulb on.
But you feel like progress is being made?
Yeah, I think progress is being made, but I don't think any of us should underestimate how long it takes and the fact that you can have setbacks. I think data's a good example. I think when people see, as you rightly say, things that they probably didn't really think about and understand, and they suddenly see it happening, that their data is being compromised in ways that they haven't imagined. Obviously, that it's unsurprising that probably causes them to think, who can I trust out there? And that is an issue. So it's for me, it's a constant issue, because the thing about trust is that it's a sort of two-way thing. I mean, if you trust somebody, I have to trust how I think that you will behave and react.
I think we have the same issue in news a bit. I mentioned sort of your fake news environment and the post-truth era. There's so much damage that's being done all the time. Yeah. And trust is being eroded all the time as well. Tell us your thoughts a bit more about what can be done to combat this in your sector.
Well, I think a lot of it is down to transparency. A lot of that is obviously there is a sort of element of ethical standards. I mean, I also think that it's partly a product, of course, and this is in the nature of it. The world is more transparent. I mean, people occasionally ask me, I know it's probably true in your world as well. Well, was there a golden age? When everything was absolutely fine and everybody behaved themselves and you could take it. And I sometimes go around the city and ask people who've been in the city for a long time this question. It's a sort of interesting question to ask. And honestly, most of them say no. It was different in the past, and it wasn't very evident. It was sometimes talked about, but it wasn't evident. But the idea that it was a golden age where everything happened perfectly, probably not.
But if you're saying transparency,
but it's very transparent now. You can see it.
You think it is? So should more be done around transparency, or?
Well, I think we all have to accept that it's the right world to it's the world we're in, and it's the right world to be in. I mean, we should assume that the world is more transparent, because it is. So any attempt to, if you like, obscure things, I think is going to end in pain and tears.
And aside from that issue of data we just talked about, are there any other sort of obvious challenges around trust that you see on the horizon?
Well, I think quite a few of these operational issues give rise to trust issues. So how much can I rely on the services that I use to be there? Cyber, again, it's interesting to think what general public think about cyber risk in financial services, how much they sort of think about it, how much they sort of feel they understand about it.
Do we know if there's been any research around that?
Probably not a lot. I'm not aware of much, no. But again, when it crops up, obviously, and in the nature of the sort of transparency we have, quite rightly, it will inevitably cause people to wonder what they can rely on.
I thought you'd all be interested to hear Andrew's views on Brexit. We spoke a little bit about it earlier. So I'm thinking of the other issues I want to touch on, but let's deal with this one now. Brexit, how are you feeling about it, Andrew? What are you asked most commonly? What's the concern that people raise with you most?
Well, I think there's a few things that we get raised as a lot. Obviously, and it depends what the audience is to some degree. So obviously the so-called cliff edge risks that we in the Bank of England have highlighted and are dealing with, which while really the risks that would arise in the event of a sudden, hard and very disorderly Brexit. And both we and the Bank of England have pointed to what we think are the ones actually, which is in the areas of clearing uncleared derivatives, insurance contracts, and data. Again, now I think the interesting thing about those is, there's a few things. First of all, we all hope, and indeed I would say expect, that there will be an orderly transition. And I was very encouraged by what Stephen Miles said yesterday, as the chairman of ESMA, the European Securities Authority, which I'm a board member of until I'm not, that he, like us, and we are working together to put in place the underpinnings of MOUs and the sort of necessary exchange of information and cooperation. And on both sides, the spirit amongst the regulators is that we are working together cooperatively. I think we've all been very clear that we mustn't let Brexit cause a sort of breakdown in relations. So that's, but obviously all of that is conditional on an environment that allows
yes, it's all very well and good to have these good intentions, but if things are stalled at the political level, that must be very much.
So what we can do is put in place all the sorts of, in a sense, the underpinning and the necessary say that, on the assumption that there is an orderly process, we're not there on the day it happens. And it could, as we now know, it's happening much later than any of us would have preferred it to happen. It's our job still to be there to say, we are ready, we're ready to go.
And since the summer, have you found sort of momentum as well, a bit more?
Well, obviously, as we get nearer
it's
to
feeling more urgent.
The urgency, and I would say yes. I think the sense of urgency has risen, as you would expect it to have done. Let's face it, we were having conversations a year ago of this nature, and the process has gone on. So it's incumbent on us to ensure that we've got the necessary, pretty substantial, amount of work on what needs to be done to ensure a smooth transition in place. We've done a huge amount of work domestically, working with Treasury, with the government, the Bank of England, on what we tend to call the onshoring of European legislation. That's now going. It's a big job that Parliament faces in the rest of this year is to pass now this vast body of secondary legislation. Take the FCA's case. We've got over 50 pieces of European legislation that are being onshored into UK legislation, which we've now been working on for 2 years. That, good news is, it's happening, it's ready, so we're over to Parliament in a sense now that they've passed the withdrawal legislation to put that into effect.
When you travel though, what do the good people of Frankfurt and Basel and Washington say to you?
Well, I think certainly from the point of view of risks, they are watching it very carefully and very closely. It's obviously unprecedented in that sense. So, and there is therefore, in our world, obviously a very strong desire to make this thing happen smoothly. I think the second thing that, we talked about the cliff edge thing, the second thing I'd come on to is, so what is the long run, what's the steady state going to look like? And of course we don't know that either.
What would you like it to look like?
Oh, well, I've been very clear. I've said quite a lot of times. So I'm a very strong believer in free trade and open markets. And in our world, underpinned by strong regulatory cooperation and strong regulatory standards. And that's going back to where we started the conversation. If you go back to what we've done over the last 10 years, internationally, huge credit, particularly to the FSB, which Mark Carney chairs, that we've got. It would have been easy in the wake of the financial crisis, and particularly the fact that it spilled over from country to country, to say, put the boundaries up, put the barriers up, as it were. And we haven't done that. The world of regulation has evolved to enable open markets to continue and to do their role. So I'm a huge believer that we have to do all we can to preserve open markets. Brexit doesn't have to mean that financial markets are closed. It doesn't have to mean that at all. It is a catalyst, I'm afraid, for having that debate again. It's not a new debate actually, but it's obviously a major catalyst for having that debate in Europe, because obviously the UK is disturbing the disturbing the landscape in that sense, which has been built around the single market. But I'm encouraged, if you look at what's been said in the US, look at what Chris Giancarlo, the chairman of the CFTC, has said in recent weeks. I mean, this is a very strong message, it seems to me, that we can continue to develop open markets based on strong regulatory standards, but also based on recognising each other's regulatory standards. And that is, for me, at the heart of it. And I hope we don't end up with a world where this is viewed as an opportunity to close markets and a view to grab business, because it will not end successfully in my view.
So for people in the room, do you have any sort of specific advice on what they should be thinking, how they should be preparing for Brexit?
Well, certainly prepare. I'm afraid it's blindly obvious. We work very closely with firms. If you feel you need to know something from us or from the Bank of England, we're both here to help. So we're very open. Please do. We'll answer all the questions we can. We'll also tell you what we don't know. And that's obviously important. I think it's important now as we go into this very intense phase that we're transparent about where it's got to. I'm very encouraged, as I say, by what Stephen said yesterday, because it's a recognition on both sides, because we've said it, as I've said it in the past, that we are working together and we will put in place what is needed to make this as smooth a transition as it can be.
One of the things I talk a lot about at the moment on air and on panels too is this issue of diversity and inclusion.
Yeah.
There are big changes being made. How is progress in the industry on those two issues, and is enough being done?
I think it's recognised now as a much a bigger issue, and you're right, and I think that all of us have an obligation and responsibility to do that. And we do at the SCA. I'm very pleased that we are a more diverse organisation actually, but we can never sit back. We've got targets which we haven't yet achieved. We've got a few years to achieve them. But to give you an example, around about 39% of our senior management is female. We want to get it higher. Our board's currently about 45%. And I will say two things. I mean, first of all, I don't want to work in an organisation that isn't diverse. I don't think it's a good place to work. Secondly, particularly as a public body, it's important that we bear, as a good resemblance to the country that we are, the population that we're serving. Otherwise, you're just out of touch, and it won't lead to good things.
So you think it has damaged culture up until this point? You can actually see.
I think it's part of the transition. Again, it goes back to what I said about the golden age. Look, the past had very different culture and very different standards and expectations. So there's a long way to go. Let's be honest about it. There is. Some parts of our world are frankly more advanced than others in that. And certainly the FCA. I mean, we are much more attuned to it. Frankly, we do look at it in institutions. We do talk to institutions about it. And we get a lot of institutions who want to come and talk to us about it.
And when you talk to them, does it feel genuine, or does it feel sometimes like lip service? Has there been this sort of seismic shift that's needed?
I think there's a shift happening. I mean, look, it's not always consistent everywhere. And I also think I do think there's quite a few institutions saying, we know we need to do this, but we haven't yet quite worked out what it takes. I think there's still a bit uses of that, frankly.
And what do you think it takes?
I think it takes a lot of commitment, actually. I also think you have to have role models. I mean, I think the institutions I've been in, and I look at the FCA, I think we are lucky that we have, strong role models in our senior management. We're not as good, frankly, on ethnicity as we are on gender, and we know we've got to work on. We're improving, but we're not there. And I think you need role models, because I think younger staff need to be able to say, yeah, I can see that person has not only got there, but is influential within the institution. And I think they look to that. I mean, they want to see that sort of thing, because they can relate to that and say, yeah, I think there's a reason for staying around here.
We touched on quite a lot of the issues that are going to be looked at in more depth throughout the day, which is great. And one of the final ones I wanted to ask you about was the role of technology in terms of conduct, particularly as well. How do you see that?
Well, it's another very big element of the shift that we're seeing. So we're very proud and pleased, frankly, with FCA that we've established quite a strong role in that through Project Innovate, through the Sandbox, through the work we do. And people say, well, what are you doing there? And I think, for me, the mindset shift for us has been to say, we're not in the business. Regulators are not in the business of sort of like all picking winners. We don't go out there and say, I think that bit of technology is good, forget that one. We are, however, in the business of enabling change. But if we don't do that, then we're not only going to be a drag on the system, but ultimately it will rebound on us. And I think that's the important thing to recognise, that we can achieve our public policy objectives, but we can achieve it in a world where we are enabling change to happen. And that therefore requires us from time to time to have a sort of long, hard look at our approach, our rule book, and say, it was designed for a world where this sort of bit of technology wasn't there. What should it look like in the future? So, to give you an example, a very live example of mine is crypto assets. We're working with the Bank of the Treasury on this. We'll be coming out with something in a few weeks' time, I suspect. Because we have in the UK, we have both with PRA have what's called a regulatory perimeter. It's particularly relevant to the FCA. And the regulatory perimeter essentially tells you that certain activities are regulated and certain are not. And that comes out of the legislation, comes out of Parliament. So crypto assets land on the world, as it were, and of course, how they fit into the regulatory perimeter is fairly random, actually, in the sense of, because this is a regulatory perimeter that was not designed with crypto assets in mind. So, so you have to ask the question, given it lands where it lands, is this the appropriate, place to have it in? And that's the thinking that we're going through at the moment. So that's an example of what we do. Second example of what we do is, how does technology work to help to tackle some of the big issues that we're dealing with in our world? So, give you an example of financial advice. One of the big things we've done in this country is transfer a lot more of the responsibility for financial decision making to individuals, particularly in the pensions world. Big transfer over quite a long time, but it's accelerated in recent years, particularly with the pension freedoms. We've also, it was a work that we and our predecessor did, made the cost of financial advice more transparent, which is a good thing, except that it does reveal to people how much it costs, and you do then get a section of the population which says, well, now I know what it costs, I'm not sure I want it, thank you. Now, so there is obviously a question in there, and there are fixed costs, obviously, in human advice, recognise that. Is there a role for technology? We can't be sure of that yet, but we shouldn't stand in the way of examining.
Is there a piece of technology, just to finish, Andrew, that excites you right now, or something that's happening in technology?
Well, I think about data. So I think technology in the area of big data processing and AI is very exciting. It's changing our world a lot. So I would say, at the moment, to be honest with you, I would say that is more exciting than blockchain. I mean, I'm not saying blockchains don't do it, but it's not. It could be major, but at the moment it just isn't, frankly, able to do many of the things we need in financial services. It's too slow. It may get there. But at the moment, I think, in our world, I think some of the stuff that's coming through data and AI is much bigger.
Dr. Andrew Bailey, thank you very much for joining us and setting the groundwork for today.